I had to use this kind of diet for health, and it really worked for me. So I was absolutely fascinated when I became an acupuncturist to find that this was Chinese dietary therapy. But it's important to think that there is no inherently good food or bad food. So with Chinese dietary therapy, you're never going to hear a good therapist tell you that this food is bad or good.
And now let's rejoin Elaine for part 2 of the energy balance approach.
Now, let's remind ourselves that the spleen is the most important digestive organ, and we really need to keep that happy. And I'm going to talk more today about weight loss, I think, than just general health. And while we've said that there's nothing inherently good and bad, we need to understand that when we're carrying body weight, it means that our spleen is already impaired. Our spleen is already not functioning optimally. So what happens is we take in food, and the spleen really tries to extract good energy from that food, and it can't, so it lays down body fat. It's really not making the best use of the food. So we already know that if we need to lose some weight, our spleen needs some particular nurturing. And the spleen is it's kind of like the mother nature of all of the organs in the body. It nurtures the entire body in a Chinese medicine sense. And one of the things that really prevents it from functioning properly is something called dampness. And it's a particular energetic concept. And so if there's one hard and fast rule in Chinese medicine when you're trying to lose weight, it's that you really need to understand which foods contain damp kinds of energy profiles and to avoid them. That's the thing that we really don't need, damp energy. And there are some fantastic foods that are particularly damp draining, and that can help us to sort of mop up the damp energy in our own systems. And these are all listed in my book, The Energy Balance Approach. Olives, for example, or grapes are particularly damp draining, and yet they're quite juicy foods, really. So it isn't damp in a physical sense, it is a particular energetic meaning. So damp foods, the most damp foods, are actually dairy products and wheat. No surprise, did you say? So you will find lots of parallels with things that we know about now in a Western sense, in terms of people finding that these are good things to avoid. But I think there are some surprises too, because one of the things that encourages the spleen to not work very well, as we've said, is cold raw food. And I think the first thing that we tend to think of in January after Christmas, when we've all overindulged, is to go on to some nice raw food. And it's entirely the wrong thing to do. Your spleen's already struggling. You've completely obliterated it with rubbish over the season, and then you give it exactly the opposite of what it likes come January. So let's have the debate. I mean, do we think that salads and raw food are good? Because, as a Western nutritional therapist, this has been drummed into me that raw foods and salads are very nutritious, and that these contain more nutrients, and as soon as you cook food, you start to break down the nutrients. That's kind of Western wisdom, isn't it? Well, there is evidence that raw foods are really not terribly useful to us. And there is lots of research evidence, if you look for it, that whilst you might mash up a raw tomato on a laboratory bench, and you might mash up some cooked tomatoes and find more lycopene, for example, which is a particular nutrient found in tomatoes, in the raw tomato, clinical trials show that if you ingest the raw tomato compared with the cooked tomato, you will actually take up more goodness from the cooked tomatoes. And even to the extent now where they've pinned it down that the best way to get nutrients out of tomatoes is tomato soup puree, that sort of thing really cooked down, much more than we would ever believe is terribly healthy. So raw foods and your yogurts and your bananas are really the things that Chinese medicine isn't too happy for you to be having. But the stomach loves them. So we've got to tack our way along again. There are no totally goods, totally bads. And And it's worth, therefore, knowing about some of the ways in which our body feels when it's a little bit encumbered by damp energy. Yes, we'll be overweight. We might feel heavy as though we're walking through treacle. We might not feel energetic at all after eating. Typical, needing to lie down and sleep after your Sunday lunch type feeling. And these are really signs that your body's feeling the effects of damp. The problem is, when you take off damp, you don't know what you're going to unveil beneath it. And if I just put into your minds at this moment in time the image of a chip pan fire. So we've got this roaring fire, we throw over a damp tea towel, that's what we're supposed to do, and the flames completely disappear. And I've never had to do it, thankfully, but I have seen the fire service training videos that when you lift off the damp tea towel too soon, what happens? The flames come straight back up. So the most common side effect that you're going to encounter is when you remove damp from your diet, you'll get flares of heat. And this is a sign that your stomach is now suffering because it's too hot. And the things that you'll get when you're feeling too hot will be physical heat, for certain, maybe mouth ulcers, tongue ulcers, hiccups, regurgitation, nausea, anything that shows you that your digestive system isn't functioning particularly well. So again, you might add something cooling into your system to help to counteract that. The most cool food energetically is watermelon. So eat a good size of watermelon for a few days and you might start to feel those symptoms start to quell down a little bit. But eat too much of it and you'll feel tired and you'll feel lethargic and all of those things because now your spleen's struggling. So this really is about getting to know yourself, and the very best way to do that is to keep a food diary and just to work out for yourself which foods make you feel good and which foods don't make you feel so good, and how you feel after certain meals, immediately or later in the day, etc. But you can do this for yourself. You really can do this for yourself. And the work that I did for several years before actually producing the book was working with groups of ladies in workshop and seminar situations, teaching them how to do this, and we got some really great results with people going out and being able to do this for themselves.
Coming up in part 3.
Cooking processes will affect foods in different ways. So with lamb, we often combine that with mint sauce. Mint is very cooling, lamb's very warming. We achieve a neutrality in that meal, which is ideal for our digestive system. Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dine like a pauper, and this is absolutely true.